There is one thing that really ties together a lot of the struggles we have in that space, and that is the development of grand narratives that have shaped how the media reports on these issues, how people think of them more widely, and how activists have been able to control narratives and to really warp perceptions of what's going on. And when I talk about grand narratives, I'm talking about the stories that we tell to ourselves and to society to form moral frameworks. It's who's the heroes, who's the villains, what makes you a good person. If you agree with this, you're a good person. If you don't, well, you probably aren't welcome in polite society. Propaganda in today's world, it doesn't come in jackboots. People aren't, frog marching and all that. It comes with a rainbow flag. It comes with a big smile and I'm your podium of truth. That's where propaganda's at now. And I think people have been lulled into it because they've expected it to come in a uniform and a jackboots and be very aggressive. But that's not the iteration that we're at.
To some people, at least, truth and facts don't matter. It's the narrative that matters. And as Annie says, it's about evoking those emotions and those powerful responses. That's what matters. And whatever you need to do to get that response, you do it, regardless of the facts or the truth.
Welcome to the Shape of Dialogue, Juliet, and
Thank
welcome
you.
to the Shape of Dialogue, Annie. So I've got Annie O'Brien and Juliet Moses. So we'll start with you, Juliet. Just to tell the audience briefly who you are, what do you do, and why are you sitting here?
Oh, well, why am I sitting here? That's a very good question. I am an Aucklander born and bred. I've got 2 sons. I am a lawyer. That's my job. I am also the president of the New Zealand Jewish Council. And have been for a couple of years, but I've been involved with the Jewish Council and kind of Jewish advocacy, I guess, for quite a few years. And so I guess that's probably why I'm here, but, I'm very interested in issues that are going on in the world, freedom of speech, all the kind of cultural issues that are happening. So I guess that's why I'm here, but maybe you can correct me and tell me otherwise.
Well, no, that's a good start.
Yeah.
That's a good start. 10 out of 10. Annie. So, who's Annie O'Brien?
I wasn't born here, but I was bred here. So I was born in London. And I am probably, I guess, most known for being one of the earlier TERFs to be cancelled in New Zealand.
Just describe what a TERF is.
So a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, they're called. But really what it is a woman who recognises the reality of biology and that we can't literally change sex. So I stumbled into it in my early 20s. I'm 34 now. And I was immediately cancelled. In the last decade and a half, I've kind of been talking about these things and have amassed some of the same, I guess, opposition that Juliet has amassed for simply talking about issues pertaining to Israel and Jewish people. And so, I guess also my connection to the UK has meant that I'm quite plugged into the gender wars over there as well.
Right.
But I'm also very interested in, same as Juliet, in many issues. I write about politics in general. I'm on the board of the Free Speech Union. And I spent a little bit of time working in Parliament, which was quite a trip. So,
But primarily you're a journalist?
I'm not a journalist, actually. A lot of people think that I...
What do you do then?
So my day job is actually I run a digital marketing agency. Most of our clients are political. Marketing, comms, digital stuff is my background. But I've ended up as a kind of citizen journalist, if you will, where I write for a Substack. And I have amassed a bit of a following on X where I kind of talk about mostly political and current events.
You actually have quite a big following, don't you?
I do. And people ask me, like, why do you have a big following? I don't know. People just...
Well, you're very prolific and you write very astutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I think because of the area I work in, being around politics, unlike other people who go to work and do, a lawyer or a nurse or something, then after work they plug into politics. I'm constantly plugged into it. So then I kind of am just, firing things off. And I guess it means that I'm probably one of the first ones to get the story out, if you will.
Right.
But yeah.
So you're sort of a pre-journalist.
Because
sometimes
when Parliament's sitting, you seem to watch it.
Yes.
Basically, because you seem to be very quick with this has just happened in the House or whatever.
Yeah, so because we have so many political clients, I make my poor team watch Question Time, unless we've got something else on. I have it on in the office, and we all just kind of discuss and tease and kind of have a laugh about what's going on. But it means that no matter which client comes to us with an issue, we know what's kind of being talked about in the House, what bills are coming up. It just provides a bit of awareness, but it means that I can then fire stuff off because I know what's going on in the House.
Yeah. Okay, Annie, why don't we start with you and what you want to talk about?
I guess before we kind of got here today, Juliet and I kind of discussed what should we talk about, and my issue being, gender identity wars, trans issues, and Juliet being focused in kind of the Jewish and Israel space. There is one thing that really ties together a lot of the struggles we have in that space, and that is the development of grand narratives that have shaped how the media reports on these issues, how people think of them more widely, and how activists have been able to control narratives and to really warp perceptions of what's going on. So we thought that might be a good idea to talk about because it affects both of our issues a lot. And when I talk about grand narratives, I'm talking about the stories that we tell to ourselves and to society to form moral frameworks. It's who's the heroes, who's the villains, what makes you a good person. If you agree with this, you're a good person. If you don't, well, you probably aren't welcome in polite society. So that's the kind of space I think is quite an interesting one for both of us.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating one because in a way that's it's the paradigm we all live in, and it's often a controlling paradigm.
It is. Yeah. And I think especially in New Zealand, I'm sure that everyone has different opinions about Jacinda Ardern, but for me, she is such a good example of establishing a grand narrative and being able to control with it, and especially around COVID, and it's the coercion using emotion, using compassion. I care about you, so I'm going to control you. And if you are a compassionate person, if you're a good person, you will also do this, or you will not object to this. And she is just a stellar example that propaganda in today's world, it doesn't come in jackboots. It doesn't. People aren't, frog marching and all that. It comes with a rainbow flag. It comes with a big smile and I'm your podium of truth. That's where propaganda's at now. And I think people have been lulled into it because they've expected it to come in a uniform and a jackboots and be very aggressive. But that's not the iteration that we're at.
Yeah, so I think just to add to that, I mean, we are at the stage that, I guess it's implicit in what you're saying, I feel that truth doesn't matter to some people, at least. Truth and facts don't matter. It's the narrative that matters. And as Annie says, it's about evoking those emotions and those powerful responses. That's what matters. And whatever you need to do to get that response, you do it, regardless of the facts or the truth. And I think the other point is that it involves, and this is when I really started getting interested in the sort of issue of gender ideology as well. I saw exactly the same kind of mode of argumentation and discourse that I saw had happened over many years with, I guess, particularly, pertaining to Israel, which is the inversion of human rights. So you take, Zionism is the emancipation movement of the Jewish people. It's was the liberation movement that gave them back their ancient homeland and obviously allowed them to establish sovereignty and give them self-determination after millennia of persecution. But that has been inverted and turned into a hateful, ideology. And so the human rights have sort of been turned on its head. The opponents of Zionism have very successfully turned it into the sort of the chief aggressor in the world or sort of breacher of all human rights. So it has become, in their telling, a hateful, bigoted ideology. Same thing I saw happening with gender ideology. So women's rights have been rolled back. Women's rights have advanced. I mean, obviously Annie can talk a lot more about this than me, but advanced and had a lot of successes and achievements. Obviously there's a long way to go. But then all of a sudden, wanting to protect those rights that had been established and advanced, the people who were wanting to protect those became the hateful transphobes, they're the bigoted, hateful people. So I saw exactly the same kind of thing happening, and I thought, this is really interesting.
But probably by the same type of people as well, or exactly the same people.
A lot. I mean, if you were to draw I wouldn't say in the Venn diagram the circles would be absolutely on top of each other, but I would say there would be a massive
big overlap.
Yeah.
I definitely see some of the same people sending me really nasty things online, replying to you, and I'm like, oh, there they are.
Yeah,
that's what they do when they're not having a go at me.
Yeah.
So why are they wrong?
Well, I think that's a big question, but I don't even know if you can say that they are, it's not that they are wrong overall. I think that what is wrong is the mode of discourse. I think it isn't really discourse. I think that they can have an opinion. For example, I have no problem with adults wanting to present as if they were the opposite sex and taking on stereotypes of feminine or masculine. That's absolutely fine. They can do that. What they can't do is then impose that on everyone else and expect us all to go along with it or to adjust the world to fit them. And so I think the aggressive manner in the last decade that these people kind of took in order to achieve the dominance, basically, that they have achieved is what is wrong.
Can you articulate what they've actually done and how they've done it?
Yeah. So they didn't initially bang down the door. They entered through HR departments, through getting into media organisations, policy teams, that kind of thing. So you had a situation where, you look at the public service, having worked there myself for a few years, I was quite astounded. You would have activists who were in policy roles, usually to do with internal processes or how the government was meant to function, and they were actively activisting. Like, you kind of, I wouldn't bring my TERFery to work. I didn't bring it to work because I was working for the Department of Conservation, so it really wasn't relevant unless we were talking about, breeding kakapo or something. But somehow they were able to do this, female male birds. But but what it was is that these people would be actively within institutions rewriting policy and bringing in new language like gender assigned at birth instead of sex. Cisgender.
And without any directive from the government?
Absolutely. This came in sideways. It certainly didn't come from the ground up because the ordinary people had no idea about it until it was kind of embedded. So it came in like this rather than coming from either above or below. And then...
So essentially it's the public service gone rogue.
It did, yeah. And then, it wasn't the only place. Academia, it happened. Mm-hmm. Also media. And then what happened was a lot of these organisations kind of vaguely knew there was this gender identity thing and they needed to be right on about it because they didn't want to be caught out being the bigots. And so they went to the experts. And the experts were places like Inside Out, which are run by young blue-haired people who have strong opinions, but absolutely no qualifications to be telling anyone how to do anything, and are really just activist groups. And so you suddenly had places like Inside Out, but also Rainbow Youth, Stonewall in the UK, writing policies for corporations, for academia, for our public service, and embedding them, and then being paid to check that they're being compliant with them. And so it was a bit of a racket, really. And so that was...
So there's commercial imperatives involved as well.
So you pay us, we'll write your rainbow policies and make sure that they're all, right on. And then you can pay us again to check that you're doing it right.
So they're monetizing extreme progressivism.
Yes, yeah. And so you then had it in these kind of key cultural touch points. You had it in the points where education. So young people are learning that this is just part of life and it's important, and there's a consensus, which there was never a consensus.
Is indoctrinating a better word?
It is.
Learning.
Yeah, definitely. Because what they achieved was through social fear, not the fear that someone's putting a gun to your face or maybe the propaganda of the past, but the fear that your entire reputation is going to be taken down. You'll be hauled into HR, you'll lose your job, your friends will unfriend you on Instagram, all the kind of things that matter to people socially. So toe the line or shut up, otherwise this happens to you. So then you get a false consensus because people go, oh, well, no one else is arguing with this, so it must be that everyone agrees with this. And it's been very similar with the Israel-Palestine thing.
Can I intro? Am I allowed to?
Yes.
Yeah. Go for it.
It's also, isn't it, that because again we see it with the Israel thing, this self-validating sort of feedback loop where you have an NGO quoting academics who then quote the NGO, and you know what I mean? It just goes around.
Idea laundering.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. Yeah.
And it's so they're in just this little bubble, and they keep. There's a sort of slightly more rude term for it that I won't use, but they keep,
please use it.
Circle jerk. It's sometimes called. But yeah, so they're all, yes, you're right, and yes, you're right, and
self-confirming.
Yeah, it's just the same handful of people who are all,
and the concept.
And they're not letting in any external.
So the concept of idea laundering, it's like money laundering. It's making essentially dirty money, making it legal, or criminal money, making it legal. So it's so it's making ideas which normally wouldn't have a democratic foundation, putting it into government and into organisations, and then being promulgated onto the people.
Yeah. I'll give you a little example of how I saw that happen recently. When in the lead up to will we or won't we recognise Palestine?
This is the New Zealand government.
Correct, New Zealand government.
We're all waiting. In particular.
Yes, we're all waiting to hear what Winston said at the UN. So in the lead up to Winston speaking at the UN, I was obviously watching what the media was saying, and they had people on, for example, Robert Patman, who comments a lot on international relations. He seems to be the sort of go-to person for the media, or particularly for RNZ. And he was convinced, this was a few days ahead, absolutely convinced that New Zealand was going to recognise Palestine. I then had a media organisation contact me, I think it was on the Friday. It was on the Friday, and the announcement was due to come out on the Saturday. And they said, can you come on Monday? I won't say which show it is, but can you come on Monday to talk about the Jewish Council's reaction to New Zealand recognising Palestine? And I said, have you got some intelligence that that's going to be happening? And this person said, well, sort of, but it's sort of speculation as well. So I don't even know how you sort of have intelligence, but sort of it's just speculation. Anyway, they were quite convinced, and I got another call later on in the day saying the same thing, or a message or whatever, exactly the same wording, the response about New Zealand recognising Palestine. And I sort of realised, and just sort of looking at comments online and stuff, that there were people who had absolutely convinced themselves that this was absolutely going to happen. There was just simply no way that it would not happen. Well, it didn't happen, obviously. But it just seemed to, and then the reaction after it didn't happen was very interesting as well, because, and David Seymour has talked about this publicly, they got an overwhelming response in terms of emails and stuff saying, thank you for not recognising Palestine. So, there were these people, I don't know how many, who were convinced it was going to happen, but there was obviously a lot of New Zealanders who actually were quite relieved and felt able to say that once the non-recognition had happened. Maybe they hadn't felt quite so comfortable about saying it beforehand. And the two things that seemed to resonate particularly with people who said thank you for not recognising it was, firstly, you cannot do it while the hostages are still being held. And secondly, you cannot do it while Hamas is in power. So those two things really seem to have got through to people, just average New Zealanders, I think. So there's also this thing that really bothers me, that Kiwis are treated by the media and the academia and the elites, whatever you want to call them, as being really stupid. But actually, people do actually understand things if you actually explain it to them properly. Don't tell them what to think. Just give them the facts and let them form their own view.
I think what you've put your finger on it in the sense that journalism used to be a process of of the axiomatic thing of telling both sides and then let the chips fall where they may. Now it seems to be more proactive from an ideological perspective.
Yes,
would you agree with that, or is that
absolutely?
And that, would you say? I mean, don't want to exaggerate, but is that all media in New Zealand, or what? And we should make a distinction when we say media. We're talking about legacy media. So TVNZ, Radio New Zealand, the New Zealand Herald, as opposed to what we're doing.
I wouldn't say it's all media. I certainly think there's some older journalists, shall we say, or older school journalists who believe in balance and objectivity and all those things. But there's certainly, I think, a younger cohort, from what I can see, who actually poo-poo the idea of objectivity and balance. They will actually say things like, oh, well, because that's just sort of, confirming or perpetuating.
That's a Zionist perspective.
Well, or it's perpetuating existing power structures, and so if we want to sort of right the balance, then we have to, the only way we can do that is actually by not being balanced, if you see what I mean, to sort of neutralise the...
Postmodernism really is ugly head again.
Absolutely. And I think you're right to distinguish based on generation or age. I mean, when I worked in Parliament, what really shocked me, probably shouldn't have, is the press gallery, which is made up of all the different, mostly legacy media. There's a few other bits and bobs in there now. They operate en masse, like a swarm of bees.
Like a herd, right?
Yeah. All through Parliament, they're all following the same thing, and they're all...
You mean physically or actually intellectually?
Both. They do. You see them move as a pack. I mean, but that's kind of natural because they're always chasing whoever's, the story of the day. But what really struck me was you couldn't differentiate between this is a staff journalist, this is a New Zealand Herald journalist, which if you've got a lovely, diverse of opinion, not of identity, media space, you should be able to kind of go, well, I'm going to get a more analytical view here, I'm going to get a more maybe conservative lens on this, a more liberal lens on this, and then you can kind of pick and choose. They were all homogenous, and they also, if it was an issue of a cultural issue, culture wars issue, they'd call it, they would, as a pack, try to destroy the politician. And it's been interesting watching David Seymour and Winston Peters this term take a very different tact. Instead of trying to play nice with them, they're pushing back. And I think it's been very successful for both of them. Because when I was there, I would stand, next to my politician and be watching a rabid mob kind of, you don't have the right opinion about a race thing or a trans thing or a whatever it is. And that would be what they would fixate on instead of one of the many issues that were also being talked about that day. And it made me question what is creating these little monsters, because they were all quite young. I think Barry Soper for a while there was literally granddad hanging out with all the kids.
So what about male-female balance? Is it balanced? Or is there a bias toward one direction?
When I was in Parliament, I would say it was female dominated, but not, it may be 60-40, 70-30, mine was 60-40 probably. In the wider journal media, I think it's definitely female dominated now.
Because the trend essentially over my lifetime has been women are gravitating much more to word orientated professions, like probably I think most graduates in law are women.
So.
Yeah.
It's an interesting phenomenon, and I think if you kind of look at the education that these young journalists are getting, you could say that it is a more feminine expression of the skills of journalism, rather than maybe, and I use that in the sense of stereotypes, how we think of women as nurturing, compassionate,
Women psychologically have higher levels of empathy than men.
Right. So when you put that into a sense of training a journalist, they're being taught, as you said, you've got to protect the victim and kind of take down the villain. So they're choosing victims and villains, and then they're framing their story around it instead of the old school way, which you might call more masculine, which was analytical of this is a side of the story, this is a side of the story, as you said.
Here are the facts.
Yeah. And so it's similar to the Jacinda effect that I was talking about before, which is that you cannot talk about an issue unless it's through the lens of compassion and empathy for the right group or person. So when they are reporting, they're not trying to report the facts. They're trying to convince you that this is the victim or the hero and that this is the bad guy. And so with the Israel-Palestine thing, when Winston didn't recognise Palestine, immediately the reaction was 100% negative from the media. There was no
which really it should be saying he just said this.
Yeah. So
it shouldn't be
the others,
any. There's opinion pieces where it can say that's terrible that he did this.
Absolutely.
But is that not the case?
No,
they didn't actually report what he said, but there was commentary on it in the same piece.
It was. What they tend to do is they do a whole chunk on what they think the real narrative is, and then they'll say, and Juliet Moses from the Jewish Council said, actually, it's a good thing. And that's a little line at the bottom, and that's supposed to be balance.
Right.
But they've framed it up as, well, she's the dissenter, when really it should be Winston Peters made this announcement and opted for New Zealand not to recognise Palestine. His reasons were this, his opponents say this, his supporters say this, and then it kind of just all falls out. And people can go, okay, I'm convinced by that or I'm not convinced by that. Instead, it was like, we are on the wrong side of history.
Yeah. One of a handful which is not true. I mean, it's more than a handful who haven't recognised it. That's it. I mean, I think the theory is you're supposed to be able to read a piece by a reporter, a pure news piece or journalism piece, not an op-ed. I mean, and not know
where the reporter's sent.
Correct. Yeah. You don't know their views. You've got no idea what
I've actually heard journalists actually say, these are elderly journalists.
Yes.
Say, these politicians, no one knows what my political views
exactly. Are. That's the way it's supposed to be. I mean, and of course, that's not the way it is now. And now you've got this massive loss of trust in the media. And I know, as I was thinking about this on the way here, and particularly, I think I changed like a lot of people during COVID. I mean, I've been a good person all my life, an obedient person, and, generally thought, yes, the government's got my best interests at heart and I trust them to do the right thing and, all the different institutions. That just changed during COVID for me over time. And one of the things as you said, was, and this wasn't necessarily, well, it was actually government-led, but, if you dared to say something on Twitter like I did, because I had two sons in high school at the time, and I would say something like, has the government do you think they've actually weighed up all the different pros and cons of extending the lockdown? Like, have they thought about the impact on children's education, for example, or mental health issues, or, all these sorts of things? Even just asking that question, saying, oh, well, has there been a sort of a weighing up process? The comments that you would get, you're a granny killer, all you care about is profits over people. Well, no, I didn't actually mention profits. I was talking about things like children's education and mental health. It was just dreadful. And
my question there is Twitter a good barometer to evaluate these things?
Not entirely, but partly it is, because it's not representative of New Zealand across the board, I don't think. But it is representative of a particular class of people who happen to be generally the decision makers.
Right, plugged into government.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. It's like if you have a glass of Ribena and you pour the concentrate in, Twitter is the concentrate. And then the rest of society is when you put the water in, and it's kind of...
So where Twitter goes, or X goes.
Yeah.
And as you say, the rest of media goes.
A lot of the time, yeah.
Right.
You can see...
So it is a barometer of the media, therefore it's a barometer of the media land, the sort of epistemological landscape that we all feed in.
Yeah, they're sort of setting the agenda. Academics as well, the academic, and we haven't really talked about them yet, but again, I was shocked by some of the academics during COVID.
Yeah.
What they said and what they didn't say, and the way they reacted to things and behaved. So for me, COVID was actually a bit of a turning point, just generally in terms of my loss of trust in, I guess, in the powers that be, in a way. And I'm not even saying, I'm not one of these. I don't think Jacinda's evil. I think she, tried to do the right thing and probably did do the right thing at the start when nobody knew what was going on. But I think it got mishandled very badly all the way through. And there were major mistakes that were made. And I don't think...
I think they prioritise the medical side over the economic and also the well-being of our children as well. And it's like they should have had an economist on the team rather than just I
think they were sort of operating in silos.
It seems like they've just focused on the outcomes of something you could measure, which is how many people died. And the ironic thing about COVID is it mostly affected, in terms of death, mortality, people over 70 or people with comorbidities. Where it didn't affect children at all, did it?
No.
Well, that's where the granny killer narrative
comes in. Exactly. Yeah. But it's that thing, if you're only measuring one metric, you're not actually getting a full sort of cost-benefit analysis of your policies.
And I think we were actually ill-served by her ego in that, because she was like, I'm not going to have one case. One case is one too many. And where other countries...
Is that what she said? One case too many?
Well, she shut us down after one. You know?
Yeah.
So...
I always do think, to be fair to the government at the time, if any of us were in that hot seat, we would make mistakes.
Oh, it's hard. It's so hard.
Yeah, it was a difficult situation, but the inverse of that is hold on. I mean, I actually have friends who their jobs are to prepare for these things.
Right.
And so why weren't we prepared?
Yeah.
Because it's not actually that complicated.
Yeah.
If, to have, it's like war games. You have pandemic games. If scenario X happens, we do A, B, and C. But it seems like they were quite flat-footed, where they had a very sort of just a one response.
That's right. It was lockdown. And over time, they should have been developing other...
tools
and ways of looking at things and refining their approach, and they just didn't seem to be. And the thing, I don't know really how we've got into COVID, but the thing that really got to me more than anything actually was the people who couldn't be with their loved ones when they were dying. I mean, that just absolutely, I was not one of those people.
Well, I was almost one of those people.
Yeah, I was. My father did die soon after sort of the end of COVID, and I was with him when he died, and I thought about that. I thought, just imagine if I'd had to wave goodbye to him over FaceTime or what. I mean, that just broke my heart, and I wasn't even in that situation myself.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, if you had been in that situation, really how you could get past that or forgive the government.
Yeah.
Even again,
but
it was for the right reasons, but
the bigger question is what is the overall cost and benefit to the whole society?
Yeah.
You know, like there will always be tragic situations in any sort of dire situation like that.
The thing that I think got lost is that governments make life and death decisions every day. So they decide which drugs, well, governments is in
the general sense,
that, you know, they decide which drugs to fund. And so there are people whose cancer drugs are not funded. And if they cannot afford to go to Australia or somewhere else, they die. And we make those decisions as we being government all the time. But the thing is, the death is removed. You know, there's a public servant who makes those decisions. And
it's also not publicised on the media.
It's not, exactly. Whereas in this case, suddenly the decision of life and death was put right in front on a podium at 1 o'clock every day. And I think that was, whereas it's good to have information, but I think it created a really perverse incentive then to be very, very conservative with lockdowns and that kind of thing. Because really those decisions are decisions that are made, they're not new, but it was just the scale and the magnifying glass on them. Because everything that a government does is about prioritising where they put their money. Well, if we put it here, then those people are not going to get it there. And that's what we argue about all the time, right?
The thing about what you're saying about Jacinda is Jacinda's a highly empathetic person, right? It's one of the things everyone loved about her. So if you're a highly empathetic person, it's hard to instantiate policies which are going to kill people, which, you know, are going to, the next day, it's like 5 elderly people died.
Yes.
So it's going to steer you into a position to try and limit that one metric rather than having a broader sort of cost-benefit analysis of the whole situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Juliet, you had an example before.
Well, I did try to explain to people when they'd say, but we can't, you know, let kids go to school or whatever because somebody might die. And I'd say, yes, but we do make, or the government, whoever, makes these decisions every day. We all do, really. We accept that there are risks of living and operating in a normal functioning society, like driving a car. If we didn't want anybody to be killed ever in a car accident, we would ban cars or limit the speed limit to 5 k's an hour, or whatever it is. But we accept that, you know, that's not going to happen because we actually do need to be able to function with our cars, but there is a cost to it, and we just kind of accept it. But people just couldn't seem to accept that.
Yeah, people don't have an economic mind.
I don't even know if I've got an economic mind.
But people, you know, people don't think in terms of cost benefit.
Yeah.
And again, you know, as Thomas Sowell said, there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Where people think in terms of solutions, if I do A, I will get B result. But they don't think of the negative impact of that.
And that's the job of a politician, really, apart from kissing babies and all that kind of thing, is managing trade-offs. It's managing trade-offs in a financial sense, managing a budget, but it's also managing the fact that you're going to upset this group of people with this policy, and then you're going to make these happy, and then hang on a minute, is that what the whole democracy wants? Do we have a mandate for this? It's all balancing those kind of priorities. But what's interested me a bit about this little COVID discussion we've had is that we are still operating a little bit under the control of compassion, just like we've talked about with the trans issue and with Israel. And that is that with trans, it's the trans child is going to kill themselves is the motif. With Israel, it's the babies in Gaza are being slaughtered. And the motif for COVID was grannies are going to die, granddads are going to die. Right. And so
it's very, very simple pictorial images, you know, visual images I can see and comprehend in my mind.
Yeah.
And if you argue
against reductive and there's no room for any nuance or complexity.
Yeah, if you say, well, what about education? Well, how can you prioritise anything over the life of your grandmother?
These are reflexive responses.
Yeah.
And you're a bad person because
you've not thought of that as the most...
Because you're low in empathy.
Yeah, apparently. And that is the thing that really has underpinned, if I talk about the gender identity movement, is a lot of the actual activists are adult males who wish to be seen as women. But the motif is the trans child who's going to kill themselves if you don't affirm them. And so they've been successful in arguing for the policy changes, the law changes they want, with that as the kind of battering ram of if you do not make these changes, there will be a whole group of vulnerable children who just want to be their true selves who are going to kill themselves. Now, there is no data to back that up. There is nothing to back it up. There is, even looking retrospectively, there have been no big swathes of suicides beyond, unfortunately, what we'd expect in those cohorts. But that's the motif. And so instead of saying we're adult males, we like to look at ourselves in the mirror as ladies, and we want you to affirm us because it makes us feel good, which a lot of people are not going to empathise with. They're not going to have as much compassion with. They say a child is going to kill themselves if you don't do this.
And that to me is like, I can't think of much worse emotional blackmail than doing that to a parent. And, especially if you're a parent who, I don't know, you don't have access to, you don't have the resources for a lot of advice and getting experts and whatever, and you get told. And again, it comes back to that trust thing, right? So you've got a doctor who's telling you this is what's going to happen, and so, well, you trust the doctor and you can't afford to pay for various experts or psychologists or whatever. So I guess you do what they say, because God forbid you should put your child in a position where they commit suicide. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is how, it is difficult for people without the knowledge, non-experts, to make those decisions when experts are telling them to do these things. But the interesting thing I find is, how do the experts get captured?
It is through the same mechanisms I was talking about earlier. So it's through the academia, the media, and public service. So the same, especially in New Zealand, it's really easy because they're all so integrated, right? And we're such a small society that the good and the great who go to all of the conferences and rainbow,
the cool kids,
the public servants who create the policies on this are also talking to the NGOs who are driving it, who are also going into the universities, who are also talking to doctors. So there is...
So sort of the self-convincing loop.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you have the case where it becomes kind of like this thing that people are like, okay, this is the thing we're talking about now. Now, if I ask questions and the first person who asks a question or pushes back, bam, they're in HR, or Twitter has cancelled them and found their employer and contacted them and they have lost their job. And then everyone else goes, whoo, I'm not going to do that. And so they just shut up. And even if they do like a soft, they might soft protest in the sense that might go, I'm not seeing any trans patients because I don't want to get involved. So they just kind of remove themselves, but they're not objecting to it so that other people are not seeing that.
It's reactive, not proactive.
Yeah.
But I think it's even more than that. I think it became like a hysteria or a mania. And Lionel Shriver's written
so good.
Yeah, that great book. I don't know if you've read it.
No, but I know
Mania, yeah.
Everyone should read it. Yes. It is my book of the year. So good.
Yeah. How everybody just gets swept along in this mob hysteria. And even if you know it's wrong, it's like you're saying, you can't, or even if you've got questions or doubts, it's just easier to shut up. And this is what you see in the book.
It's hard to swim against the grain. We're mimetic animals. We're designed to copy.
Yeah, but people also there are some people who hold out or have doubts or whatever, but it's also people genuinely losing their ability to think critically. And this is what I've seen, that the latest mania is with the Israel-Palestine thing, or particularly with the Gaza war. And look, sure, you can criticise Israel. There's quite a bit to criticise. The war has been horrible. Wars are horrible. That's why it's best not to start them, especially when you're up against a more powerful enemy.
Can we remind the audience who started the war?
Yes, well, exactly. Well, of course, people will say, the war's been good. Hamas didn't start the war. It predated.
Okay. But if we put it at a time, it was Hamas who started the war
because
and we remind how many people were killed.
Well, on October 7th, yes, there were 1,200 people murdered. There were 250 people taken hostage.
Women brutally raped. Babies put in ovens.
Yeah. Whole families burned alive.
And the thing about this is that you go on the internet, it's not hidden.
Yeah.
That Hamas themselves put videos online and said, we did this.
We're proud of it.
We did this. Look how great I am. I killed 7 Jews and I raped 3 women and I did.
When you say they raped 3 women, what they did to those women
was horrendous.
I mean, it makes the Nazis look great.
Yeah.
The level of barbarism is,
it's
medieval.
It's worse than medieval. It's actually worse than medieval.
Yeah.
It's beyond medieval.
But
it's beyond what the Nazis did.
Yeah. What disturbs me the most though is that of course Israel's saying that, or Juliet's saying this, that happened, but there's no proof. No, they said we killed them. We did that. Yeah. We're proud of it. Exactly. And everyone's pretending that didn't happen.
People don't actually want to listen to Hamas or take them at their word. Oh no, they don't. They don't really want.
Because it goes against their internal narrative.
Exactly. It's literally in their founding charter that they want genocide, and they keep making statements. And they've said they don't regret October 7, and they do it again.
Okay. They hope to do it anyway.
I'm going to be devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Surely Israel's response was disproportionate. Okay, 1,200 died on October 7th.
Yes.
What are the numbers? If we quote Hamas.
Yeah, if we quote Hamas, correct.
It's about 32 million now.
32,000.
The latest is 65,000 or whatever. Of course, that includes combatants. Which I believe the latest number I saw is something like 25,000 Hamas and other combatants. It also includes those who Hamas have killed themselves, either by misfiring rockets, and that happens quite a bit, or the sort of
so friendly fire.
Correct. All the sort of executions we've been seeing since the ceasefire. Amazingly, all the people who care so much about Gazans suddenly have nothing to say about Gazans being killed by Hamas.
It's quite. Yeah. Has Chloe chimed in on that?
No. I can't understand.
So Chloe Swansbrook, the Greens leader.
Yes, yeah. And it also includes natural deaths, because there's basically no other register of everybody who has died in the last 2 years. Yeah, and that's quite a bit. And 2 million people, actually quite a few do just die from natural. Correct. Anyway, leaving all that aside.
But do we
question.
Sorry, do we actually know a legitimate number? Yeah.
Well, I think
does Israel publish what they think it would be?
I think if you take away let's say the 25,000 and then the others, I think it's maybe I think the civilian count is somewhere probably between 20 and 30,000 maybe. And I have to say,
which is 20 or 30,000 too many.
Correct. And I was just going to say, I don't rejoice in that at all. I mean, it's terrible. Wars are terrible.
We don't want anyone to die in war.
Correct. Which again comes back to Hamas should not have started on October.
Because before on October 6th, the Israelis weren't killing any.
There was a ceasefire in Gaza. There was no Israelis in Gaza. They completely
pulled out
in
2005.
2005. Yeah. So in terms of the disproportion thing, if you compare these figures that we've just been talking about with any other war, actually the civilian to combatant ratio is very low, possibly even quite a bit lower than recent wars that we can look at. And the other thing that's not factored in is, of course, that there has never been a war like this before, where Hamas, they're now saying it's more than 400 kilometres of tunnels that were dug under the ground. They're actually saying they think, because Israel hasn't unearthed them all, that it's a lot more than that, potentially. I heard somebody say the other day that it's actually more than the London Underground and the New York subway combined, because there are all these layers.
We should get them in to sort our transport problems out.
Exactly.
Bloody hell, they'd have it done in a few years.
Exactly. So no one has ever fought in those conditions before, where the combatants are all in the tunnels, hiding in the tunnels with the civilians up the top.
They don't follow
trapping houses.
Yeah, they don't follow the rules of war.
No. And that I think another thing.
So they're truly a terrorist organisation.
The booby trapping that they did. Like, remember how there was, Biden said you must not go into Rafah and all eyes on Rafah and all that kind of thing. So there was that big delay before Israel went in. And that time apparently allowed Hamas to go through and booby trap every second or third house. And these are houses, civilians' houses. So the conditions of the war were like nothing that anyone has ever seen, with a ruling entity, Hamas, that again literally says they are happy for their people to die. They want to sacrifice their people because this is, do
they actually say that?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they say this.
The mothers say it. I've lost 3 sons. I'm so proud. They're
and this is this is the price that our people must pay for destroying Israel, which is our great goal. So that all marks it out as a very, very exceptional war, and yet the civilian to combatant ratio appears to be very low in relative terms. So that's a very long answer to your question about disproportionality. Yes, the destruction is terrible. The physical destruction, the rubble, it's terrible. But that is what happens in a war of this
if you look at Berlin in 1945.
Well, exactly. I'm not a war expert. I'm just going on what I've read and been told and seen and whatever, and using my brain.
Look at London as well, after the Blitz.
Exactly. But but coming back to this sort of thing about the mania and the hysteria, this is people just have completely lost all sense of proportion.
Yes, well, that's what I was going to ask you. What I'm quite interested is I've never seen people get on, protest down Queen Street en masse for all the Muslim on Muslim killing.
Well, that's right.
So,
or the Sudan,
Sudan, Syria.
Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world at the moment.
Yeah. So because I've really tried to wrap my head around this. I have friends who are definitely pro-Palestinian and think what Israel is doing is wrong. They're not anti-Semitic, but I can only come to a conclusion that what they're saying is actually anti-Semitic because it's not actually rational, because they're not saying those things about the Muslim on Muslim wars, which are killing possibly more people. Probably
the Muslim on Christian and Africa.
Muslim on Christian, whatever.
Yeah.
So why is there such a focus on Israel?
Very good question. I mean, I think.
And is that focus anti-Semitic? Because it's not proportional.
I think very good questions there. I mean, anti-Semitism is extremely complicated. People will tell themselves. I mean, your friends would be horrified probably if you said you're being anti-Semitic, right?
Well, I'm not saying they're anti-Semitic, but the views are. Yes, the only conclusion I can come to is that it's an anti-Semitic view.
Yeah. So sometimes I talk about, and other people talk about, it's anti-Semitic in effect, but not necessarily in intent. So in other
they're my
words,
friends,
So because they're holding, here's another very useful statement. The state of the Jews has become the Jew of the states. In other words, Israel as the Jewish people's homeland is being singled out and held to a different standard in the same way that the individual Jew, would be or might be by the anti-Semite, right? Or they're having the same sort of tropes applied to them. Child killer being an obvious one. I mean, that's one that's been around
for ancient
centuries. Yeah.
If we're talking about narratives and storytelling, these are not new ones. At university, which admittedly was some time ago now, I studied history, and one of the papers I did was on Nazi Germany, and it stuck with me because it was just uniquely horrifying. And felt close enough that it was like, how did that happen in like my grandparents' lifetime, Yeah. And so I think back to what we heard in that paper that I took, the blood libel,
Just explain blood libels.
Well, just the idea that that Jews are going around killing babies, that
because they want to use their blood for ritual purposes to make matzah from it, or what?
It's really.
It's a conspiracy theorist theory.
And it's also, the idea that they are all wealthy and controlling everything. And it's like, well, yeah, they're wealthy Jews. And also there's actually very interesting, history if you think about Jewish people who fled persecution in Europe and then went to America. And perhaps the reasons why so many of them were successful was because of the unique life experience that they had suffering, and the fact that they kind of took those learnings and were uniquely positioned to create business.
It's the reason why a lot of immigrant communities are successful.
Yeah, because
Chinese are successful, Indians are successful.
Yes, exactly. It's not that you look at some of the incredible business people who come from China or India, say, in New Zealand. It's not that they have some inbuilt function that other races don't have. It's that as immigrants, they bring a certain personality. The type of person who tries to stay in their country tends to have a different personality.
They're self-selected.
And so it's similar in that sense. I kind of look at the success of Jews in America. It tends to have come from a legacy of suffering and survival and grit and that kind of thing. And you can look at those stories in a lot of different populations who have suffered historically, and then they succeed. But we can do all that kind of thing. But instead, what people do is they go, well, there's a Jewish family who've got lots of money there, and then there's a number of Jews in Hollywood, and then there's, in banking, and then it's like, okay, now do Italians, or now do Greeks, or whatever. And you can find people everywhere. But there's this unique story of Jewish control that existed in the Second World War as well, in the precursors of the Second World War. This idea that they needed to be eradicated because they were hoarding wealth, or they were, on the other hand, which is this blows my mind, is you can have two different narratives at the same time.
Oh yeah, internal contradictions galore.
So you have the wealthy one, the wealthy, powerful one, but then you also have the vermin one, right? So it's actually they're all dirtying our cities. They need to be eradicated because they're poor and yuck and whatever. And it's these stories have come back around, and I it wasn't long after October 7th, I remember thinking, oh my God, these are the same narratives. It's the same thing, but it's being perpetuated in a different setting, and especially online. Yeah, and it's this. There's something unique about anti-Semitism. There's hatreds of all kinds. There's racism, there's homophobia, there's sexism, whatever. But there's something about anti-Semitism that just won't die. It gets kind of brought back in to deal with the next generation of,
And especially when the world is in a bad state and, there's a lot of uncertainty. So it's scapegoating.
Well, I was going to say exactly, they're the ultimate scapegoat.
Exactly. And so this, again, comes back to this, so as we know with the Nazis, and the Nazis... There's a whole history of anti-Semitism before that.
Well, thousands of 2,000 years.
Exactly. But, Jews are the source of all evil, and in order to, they're uniquely evil, and in order to save the world, we need to eradicate the Jews, right? It's that sort of redemptive story, or salvation, salvation for the world, but we have to get rid of the Jews in order to get it.
Especially the origin story of Islam, people don't realise. Muhammad tried to convert the Jewish tribe that he'd been spending time with. This is a very simplified version of the story, but and they said no, and so they were all slaughtered. But they were the first ones to say no to Islam, to Muhammad, and so that legacy.
That's why there's such an animosity to the Jews.
I mean, it goes back to that point of
So you've got that, and then the Jews killed Christ.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've got it.
But so you see that coming through with Israel again. Israel is the source of all evil. I mean, coming back to Chloe Swarbrick, co-leader of the Green Party, she has stood here in her speeches at the protests and somehow linked the Gaza war to homelessness, climate change. She's linked it to, she's even brought in the treaty somehow. It's all part of it's this grand unifying narrative that somehow, Gaza is responsible for all the world's ills. I can't, the logic defies.
It becomes the locus of attention.
Well, exactly.
For the activist mindset.
But so in order to save the world, Israel needs to be eradicated. That's basically where we're at now. Israel has to be wiped off the map. So, don't know what will happen to the Jews there.
I think they call it the final solution.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as well that what Chloe's doing there by wrapping it into the leftist progressive. Progressive does not work as a word for them now, but they,
regressive.
Yeah, exactly. What they're doing there is false teaming. So, for example, if you were someone, I was on the left for most of my, I was brought up on the left, and the first time I did not vote left was 2020. I voted for Labour Greens in 2017, and what made me uncomfortable initially, as someone on the left, was the false teaming of if you believe in the values of progressivism and liberalism, you must also believe in all this trans stuff. You must also support Palestine. And I remember being like, well, I don't. Am I not allowed to pick and choose? And then I found myself, voting centre right because I agree with them on more now, especially on that social stuff, than I do the left. And they let you pick and choose. And that's the difference, is that I find I can, with people on the centre right, I can go, all right, I believe this, and but I disagree with you on this. I can say to Jordan Williams, I think that a capital gains tax wouldn't be that bad actually, and he's like, well, you're wrong, but okay, and we're like, we're still all good.
Right. So you can there's essentially on one side there's a dialogue, on another side there's
condemning, right? Yeah. And it was, again, I was a member of the Greens Party, and it was like you were out.
Right. Well, we should wrap up, but just one final question, and I'll put it to you, Annie. Why are the progressives so good at communication?
That is a $1 million trillion question, and I've been very critical of the current National Party for their failure to storytell in this term of government, because I think if they don't get a second term, it'll be because they failed to bring people along. And what it is, I think it comes down to the emotional compassion, empathy, story telling that the left has just been so successful at. It existed before Jacinda, but Jacinda really, if you want to see a masterclass in controlling the narrative, Jacinda Ardern is it. And credit to her comms team as well. I think that in telling people what is good, what is bad, how to be a good person, rather than this is our economic outlook. This is our, people just instinctively respond to emotion more than analytical kind of.
You only have to go back to Aristotle to find that out.
Exactly. And then you look at the division of demographics in voting, and you see that on the whole, women in New Zealand vote to the left. And it is the especially prevalent, we're seeing it different in young men and women voting in opposite directions. And that again, we go, okay, women are more likely to be compelled or find connection to emotional, empathetic stories. And I think that if the centre-right doesn't figure out how to tell their story in a way that connects, they're in big trouble, because that is what people vote on now. They go, I'm going to vote for Jacinda or Chloe because, look, they seem to really care about people. And you're like, well, you know what? Luxon probably does care as well. He's just really not expressing it in a good way, And so I think that they have to find a way. And I wrote a piece a few months ago, and I said, and I still 100% believe it, National needs to find their biggest donor and get a blank check out and go look around the world to find the best storyteller. They need to go and see the MAGA people, see the Brexit people, see whoever worked with Barack Obama. He was fantastic at storytelling as well. And they need to go, we will pay you whatever you want to come and literally live at Luxon's side until the election. And then that has got to be their priority, because I just think no matter what they do now, no matter how much good they do in policy and legislation, if they don't bring the people along in some kind of story, they're going to lose.
So it all comes down to story.
Yeah.
We're narrative animals.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, well, that's a really interesting place to end. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. It was very enjoyable.
It's been awesome. To help the Shape of Dialogue grow, please subscribe, like and comment and share it to all and sundry. Many thanks.